Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. My name is Paul and I'm joined today by Ed Pike, all the way from the beautiful island of Crete over in Greece, where he tells me it's really warm and they are predicting an unpleasant kind of hot heat wave, very hot heat wave of the weekend. And here we're struggling in the cold and wet and miserable weather. Good afternoon, Ed. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, so are you used to the heat, or have you had to acclimatize over time, or how are you with it? I know a lot of Brits go out there and they kind of just like lay motionless for the 2 weeks they're on holiday because they can't take it.
I guess you do acclimatize a little bit, but I would say even the Greeks aren't acclimatized. They're constantly complaining about the weather, that it's too hot or too cold. So you kind of get used to it. Anything up till 30, 32 degrees, I'm fine with it. When it goes beyond 33, then I tend to struggle. It gets harder to work.
Yeah, I'm good in hot weather, provided there's a pool or the sea nearby, so I can just kind of chuck myself in and cool off for a few minutes. But I love Greece. I've not been there for a long time. I spent the 80s hitchhiking around Europe, and I spent quite a few months over on the Greek islands, Greece, Corfu, and there's another island that's just lost out of the top of my head. Never mind, it'll come back. Lindos, all sorts of places. Anyway, never mind. We're not here to talk about me and my travels. We're here to talk about you. So, what brings you to the show today, Ed?
What brings me to the show? Good question. Well, first of all, I love the title of your podcast. I think that's a beautiful invitation for people right now in these times. And I feel like, I have, as I spoke to you a few months ago, I think a lot of us are going through this very intense transformation where, which can be very difficult for some. And they bring up a lot of negativity, a lot of challenging things. And on the other side of that, I feel what I do with my work, with my coaching, with my therapy work as well is support people through that, to find that happy head, to find that happy place, to find that more satisfying, more fulfilling place. So yeah, I'm really curious about, this conversation, about speaking to you, about being able to share a bit of my experience and my story to support those that need it, perhaps.
Yeah, we spend too much time doing the things we don't want to do, I guess. I mean, I spent years and years and years working in jobs that I was happy with for a time, but it became the only thing, no hobbies, no interests, no outside kind of things to do. And that's why I quite often reminisce about my times in the 80s when I was traveling around, because, zero responsibilities, zero kind of baggage, lots and lots of freedom, and it didn't matter whether I turned left, right, or went forwards or backwards. It was so different to kind of the way my life is today. The only possessions I had was the stuff I could carry in my rucksack, and that makes a world of difference today. I'm in a 2-bedroom flat. I've got a whole lot of crap in storage, and it's just stuff that we kind of accumulate. And it's bizarre because we seem to spend so much time collecting stuff that we don't either need or use, and then we, like me, I'm guilty of this just as much as anybody. I've got this whole mini room in a storage unit full of stuff which I should really make the time, go there, throw or give away most of the stuff. Because I mean, it's been in there for what, almost a year and a half at the very least, where I've not actually been in there taking any bits out or anything. So that clearly shows me that, I could get rid of most of that stuff, but I just don't do it. And I think a lot of people do that with the mental stuff up here. They carry this stuff around with them for years and years and years and years, knowing full well that they could get rid of it if they wanted to, but for some reason we don't.
Yeah, and just to maybe kind of give some insight into that. So I studied a form of body psychotherapy, very holistic body psychotherapy called core energetics. And it talks about the 3 kind of layers of the self. So you have the higher self, which of course is our joy, it's our yes to life, it's our want to be in connection with each other, it's our love. And then we also have the lower self, which is the no to life, the part of us that, you know, the bit more ugly and destructive, and the shadowy side, you could call it. And then because we're ultimately afraid of showing either of these sides, we tend to live in what they call the mask. So the mask is patterns of thought, patterns of behavior, keeping us in the future, in the past, away from the body, away from the moment, away from our breath, away from all these feelings that we have in the body, which are, you know, ultimately some of them are destructive and negative, but there's also so much beauty and joy and creativity. So yeah, that's what I see. And, you know, when we stay in our heads a lot, we're ultimately avoiding something that's in the body, something that wants to be seen and heard and felt. Yeah. And I love that way of seeing it. It kind of puts into beautiful framework, you know, very simple, but also it gives people an invitation to question, you know, what is my mask? How am I not living authentically right now? You know, what am I actually avoiding in this moment? If I breathe, okay, what's the tension maybe that I'm feeling? What's the resistance? What's the ickiness? Yeah, it just allows us to kind of reconnect a little bit, I think.
Why do you think people don't ask that question?
Good question. Fear of pain would be the first thing that comes. The fear of experiencing the pain, the energetic, emotional, physical pain in the body. There's a lot of, you know, we create a lot of stories around pain, which makes it 100 times worse than what it actually is. Like they say, an emotion lasts 16 seconds maximum. You know, we make them last so long because we hold them in our bodies. You know, we kind of, over the years of growing up and avoiding these feelings, we contract muscles, and it literally holds that energy into the body. And so we want to avoid, to relax and to drop into that space and to feel that pain. But, you know, when you do take someone, or I know you've probably experienced it, I've experienced it many times, not just in therapeutic spaces, when you finally release that energy, it's amazing. It's you know, it's pleasurable. There's pleasure in like releasing that sobbing or that anger in a in a kind of controlled environment. That's not the right word, but, you know, in a way that is positive, in a way that is encouraged and held. There's a lot of pleasure in that because it's the body's, you're kind of coming back to the body's natural, like, oh, yes, you know, the body's natural expression, I would say.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there, though, Ed, when you said that it's fear. A lot of people are afraid of things that actually haven't happened and may not happen. Like the fear of letting go is kind of like, okay, well, if I let go, what's going to happen? Will I suddenly become a different person? Will I walk away from my responsibilities? Will this happen? Well, we're kind of worrying about the future, and the future doesn't exist. And yet, rather than experiencing the moment, as you said earlier, the breath and the space that you're in right now, this instant, we don't want to. For some bizarre reason, it's almost like we have to hold on to the handrail. Otherwise, if we let go, all this woo-woo stuff might happen. I might get all these, you know. I actually think people are afraid of joy and true happiness and the freedom that letting go of stuff gives you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, you know, what comes into mind as you say that is when we say yes to that, we say yes to ourselves unconditionally. We say yes to our authenticity and to showing up in the world, you know, as ourselves, with all our likes, all our dislikes, you know, things that people might think crazy, but that we just love inside and just really turns us on, you know. I've been listening to a lot of hip hop lately and dancing around to hip hop, you know, and a few months ago, I was doing that as a kid a lot in my room, you know, just kind of dancing around, and I haven't done that recently, until recently. And I realized that was partly because of what my partner would think or what other people would think, and just kind of letting go of that and just doing what brought me joy was amazing. And I really realized, you know, that with that example, like how much we do hold back from ourselves from all these quirky things that, that we actually feel inside and feel really good to us, but from the outside might look really strange. So, saying yes to joy means saying yes to all of that. It means saying yes to all those little things. And there's a lot of fear of how we're going to be perceived. And I mean, I speak for myself, I see that also in my clients, of course, and in the world around us, but that's definitely a factor.
You talked about, we worry about what other people might think, even people that are closer, like you mentioned your partner as an example. What is it about what other people may or may not be thinking that scares us so much?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the person. I think there's I take it back to core because it's such a beautiful kind of framework to work through. There's, 5 core wounds, for example, rejection, abandonment, humiliation, control, and another one. And, we all have these in different variations in our bodies, in our lifetimes, in our experiences. Some of us, might be more sensitive to rejection. I definitely am more sensitive to rejection, for example. Someone might be really sensitive to abandonment, and so do everything they can to avoid being abandoned by a partner or tribe. So I think those fears vary from person to person, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, really. We all have this kind of, idealized image of who we are, or who we think we should be in our minds. And a lot of us are kind of running or attempting or striving to reach that idealized image, which actually, when we let that go, we can actually be present to who we truly are, and to what's here, and to what do I want to do right now, and what excites me right now, rather than perhaps this image that often can be built from conditioning, from what our parents told us, and what we learned from TV, from our hurtful and painful experiences. A really good example, I love going to the gym, and I love looking after my body, and I'm really interested in bodybuilding and CrossFit. And I started that when I was 18 as a way of really escaping, as a way of feeling, better and bigger and stronger than other people. And I did that, I continued that into my years of personal training in London. And then after a while, I started to find that more holistic path and to connect more to myself, and really put that to the side. Kind of, I judged it for many years actually as something very superficial. And again, it's only recently in coming back to myself that I'm realizing I'm not doing it for anyone else apart from the fact that I feel amazing when I do it. I feel really good. I love moving my body. I like pushing my body. I love, finding what I would call our genetic potential. That's a word from Ross Edgley, the athlete adventurer, through physical training, developing that. And that's something, again, that from the outside, I was judging it. I had this idealized image of myself as this person, let that go. And now what's emerged is the same thing, but from a more connected and more authentic and sincere place, a more passionate place, actually, rather than it being as a way to escape, as a way to protect and defend myself. I'm coming in this example to my fitness from, a passionate and embodied place, which is different. Yeah, I think we went off track there, but I think that was related to your question.
Kind of. But would you agree or disagree that many people don't ever push themselves? Yes, you've got people that go to the gym. Yes, you've got people that are into athletics and martial arts and bodybuilding, but the vast majority of people don't actually do anything to kind of grow, whether that's physically, mentally, or in any way, shape, or form. We just kind of, like I said earlier on, get up, have breakfast, go to work, come home, have dinner, watch TV, go to bed, and this kind of endless cycle.
Yeah, exactly. I've started calling these cycles loops. Like you might have seen Westworld, these AI are stuck on story loops, and they just keep repeating that same loop. And we're exactly the same, as you say. And the loop might be something big, like we repeat the same patterns with our partner over a number of years, partners, or a loop could be small, like you said, like, doing the same thing every day, or small things like you dressing up the same way, or in the same style every day. Yeah, and there's definitely a fear of escape, or a fear sometimes also maybe not really knowing how to, not seeing that we're stuck in that loop, not being aware of it, and having these perhaps feelings of not feeling satisfied, not feeling fulfilled, like feeling a bit icky, but not really knowing why.
If you'd have said that 20 or 30 years ago, I would have agreed with you that we didn't know how to do things. We maybe might not have been aware. But you mentioned Westworld and loops. I was thinking, when you mentioned Westworld, I was thinking Groundhog Day.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a brilliant, brilliant film, because until he realizes what he needs to do to escape or to improve his life, he's caught in this endless cycle of repetition. And, in the end, he tries to kill himself because he cannot bear the fact that he now recognizes that he's in this loop. And most people today know how to access information. Most people know that if they want to do something, somebody's probably already done it and probably documented it and videoed it and probably written about it. So the information is there, but we still don't seek out that information. I mean, in the past couple of years, there's been a massive increase in people like you and I doing various types of coaching and therapy and such like. Yet people still don't reach out. People still don't take that step forward to begin a process of change. And I find that kind of fascinating, but also really, really sad, because people are stuck in their own personal Groundhog Day. They know there's a way out. They know there's a way to change, and yet they still don't change. And I would love to kind of figure out what it is that stops people from making that move.
Yeah. Well, there's something called negative pleasure, which ultimately, maybe everything we do, I don't know, is linked to pleasure, either maybe positive pleasure, but also negative pleasure. When we're kind of, I don't know, for me, for example, my addictions are caffeine and, scrolling on YouTube. And when I'm engaged in those in a destructive way, there is pleasure in it. There's a pleasure in my body. Although at the same time, I feel it's not the life-enhancing, opening, expansive pleasure of, for example, going for a jog or eating, having a smoothie, or doing something that really lights me up. I really feel it, and for me, that's it. We're kind of, we're unconsciously stuck in the negative pleasure, and because it brings us pleasure. And once we admit that we do it because of pleasure, we take our power back. We could then choose to go, okay, well, I'm doing this because this actually does fulfill something, but it's not what I want ultimately. So maybe then we have a bit of maneuvering space to start to make that change, to open up that door of possibility of something different.
There's nothing wrong with negative pleasure, as you call it, Ed, because I was having a conversation with somebody a couple of months back. No, it's actually in response to a post I wrote about the fact that if you spend your entire amount of free time doing Netflix and chill, you're not going to grow. And somebody came back and said, well, Paul, there's nothing wrong with doing a bit of Netflix and chill. And I replied, you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this weekend, ice cream, pizza, Netflix and chill. As long as that's, the exception to the rule. The following weekend, you're going to do something different. The weekend after that, you do something different. But if you do it every single minute of every single second of your spare time, that is incredibly negative. So I don't have a problem with people spending time, like you say, scrolling through YouTube or whatever, but it's the vast amount of time where nothing is being done, just sitting and vegging in front of the TV, or not taking action. People moan and moan and moan. I don't like my boss. I don't like my job. I don't like this. I don't like that. I hate this. I hate that. This is horrible. That is horrible. And again, they're in their own personal Groundhog Day, because all they do is moan and whine and complain. And yet they don't take any steps to kind of get themselves out of that loop.
Yeah, very true. And I guess it all comes down to being closed or open, open to change or closed to change. And how that shows up in us is very different. But coming back to what you said, it's also, you know, when we're engaging in that negative pleasure, it's also how much awareness are we doing it with? Like, you know, am I aware that I'm going beyond my boundary and I'm still choosing to do it? At least I'm aware. Or am I just, you know, completely lost in what I'm doing? You know, because the one is a more embodied and present way of doing it. And, you know, it can, I think, still be fulfilling, you know, in that respect. And it's also our way of exploring, you know, like 2 weeks ago, I went way beyond my boundary in terms of work. Since I was creating a website for someone, I do that on the side. And I worked like 7 hours through the whole day. And by the end of the day, I was like, I've gone way beyond, you know, I can feel my body like, no, I can feel my mind, my body was like a big no. And I haven't done that since, you know, I've had that awareness to go, this is too much for me. I need to really break down my day, you know, and I can change as a result of that because of the awareness of doing it. And I was fully aware in the moment I was doing it.
So, how do people develop that awareness? Because you did it, and then you recognized that it wasn't what this wasn't what you needed. So you made changes, you made adaptations. What can people do to become aware that they've got themselves in that situation and can make changes?
Yeah, good question. So my kind of sense, my experience of this is that we're either kind of closed, we're in this loop, and it feels like, you know, a bit of a cage, a bit of a trap, and it's in our mind, it's in our bodies, it's all connected. It's in the way we feel, it's in the way, you know, our perception of life is, and it just feels very closed in. So we have to kind of find our way to just open up those doors, those windows, you know, to expand that space a bit more and to create that openness. And so I think for different people, it's different ways. You know, for some person, someone might find if they can, stopping, breathing, just checking in with themselves is enough to kind of, you know, open up something. Someone, as you said yourself, it could be researching and reading, that might open up something. You know, even Netflix, even some videos, you know, you can get a lot of wisdom if you're open to it through movies and Netflix and YouTube videos. So, and it's not really about what you do, it's kind of how you do it. Are you doing it because you're open to changing and you're open to receiving, you know, the guidance, your own guidance, ultimately, your own knowing, which is always inside and reflected out from the outside through books, life, conversations, etc., dreams, etc., etc. Or are we ultimately wanting to, even if we're maybe perhaps not aware of it, but wanting to remain closed? Yeah, it's simple, but it's not simple.
I think it's about choice. I think most people know where they are and whether they are happy where they are or not. But beyond that, it's that some people make the choice to move out of that situation. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, just decide that, no, I'm not going to make that choice.
Yeah.
Whether it's because they're afraid of something, whether they feel they can't do it or they don't deserve it, I don't really know. But I am positive that most people know how to get out of a situation. They just choose not to for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, take yourself, for example. You just mentioned a few minutes ago that you were in London and now you're in Greece. So what happened to take you kind of out of the metropolitan, you know, big city, bright lights, all that kind of thing, to where you are now?
Yeah. I would say my gut, my instincts took me here, my heart. So it happened very naturally, it happened very organically. I was with my ex-boyfriend who was Greek. We were living in London and we came to Crete for 2 weeks. And these 2 weeks we spent on an island in the south of Crete, at least for one of the weeks, and living on the beach, you know, waking up naked, going into the water, spending the day lounging under the trees, you know, eating out of tins, going to taverna at night. And something in me was like, oh, this is life. You know, this is what life is. This is what I need for my mind, for my sense of joy and satisfaction. I need this. And so then it was the following year, we came back for 2 months, started renting a place, and it kind of just unfolded. But the one kind of I guess the way that happened was me following that kind of that feeling, that sense of like, oh, I'm home. This is what I need. This is what I need. I don't know how I'm going to create it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I just need this in my life. And that was the ultimate kind of guiding light, that just that knowing. It's hard to put into words, but that's that taste, that feeling, which very, very much felt like home for me. Alive, in nature, free, away from the loops or the groundhog day of being in London. I was a personal trainer. I was slowly moving and shifting into more holistic field, but it was still kind of groundhog day. And I hadn't left London apart to go home to France for Christmas to see my parents for the past 6 or 7 years. Yeah. So it really was, that was the opening for me. I had begun to open previously, and that was a really big opening to something a lot deeper, to another way of living completely. Because I'd always been drawn by the bright lights of London, by the city, especially as a gay man. That's where a lot of, most gay men congregate, is in cities. So coming to Crete was completely outside of that, but completely right.
I mean, you couldn't have two more disparate worlds, could you? Metropolitan London and everything that goes on in London, 13 million people in Greater London. And then the island of Crete can't have more than 100,000 people, a couple of 100,000 people in total.
No, it's bigger than that. We got in winter 800,000, and in summer times 4.
So you got the tourism. Yeah. 800,000 compared to 13. I mean, 800,000 spread across quite a big island. Yeah. So it probably doesn't actually feel like that. Whereas in London, you're on kind of like, you're packed in like sardines. So that must have been a huge culture shock to a certain extent. I mean, it's different for a vacation because you're there for 2 weeks, you can enjoy yourself, then you go back home again. But to actually move out there and you do all the paperwork and get yourself permission to stay, and to actually become part of the landscape, as it were, that's a huge kind of change.
Yeah, I was lucky in that I've done that a few times in my life. At the age of 5, we moved from the UK to France. I lived in Argentina, I lived in Spain. I traveled a lot in my life. So coming to Crete and Greece, especially because I lived in Barcelona a bit and Buenos Aires, it had that very Latin feel. So I felt very much at home, actually. And because it has that, I mean, Greece is the corner of all these continents, right? It's got Middle Eastern influence, it's got Africa right next door, it's got Europe. It's like this kind of melting pot of cultures. And it also has a kind of more continental feeling than the UK did. So because I grew up in France, actually, especially in the winter when everything's quieter, it's more like kind of everyone's in their homes and there's a more villagey feel to it. Especially then I felt like I was back in rural France where I grew up. So for me, it wasn't a massive culture shock for me. And actually, I kind of thrive on those changes. I've really enjoyed doing those changes throughout my life. But for some people I know, it's definitely more of a culture shock.
Oh, yeah. So a completely different way of life, even though it's still part of kind of continental Europe per se, it's still a huge shift from what most people in Britain and probably northern France as well come to expect. It's a completely different way of life. So your clients, Ed, where do they come from?
Well, I have clients all over I won't say all over the world, all over really. They come from different backgrounds for sure. I have clients in New Zealand, UK, Greece, Israel, States. The common thing is that, they're either coaches, they're either therapists and healers, or they're creatives and artists. And there's some entrepreneurs at some point. But the common thing is that they have this kind of knowing, what I call it spiritually minded. They have a knowing of something profound, something intangible that they want to share with the world. They want to share with their clients. They want to share more of. And so they want to kind of come back to what I call that alignment, alignment with their more intangible, what I call spiritual potential, as well as their bodies and their genetic potential. They come from all different sorts of walks of life.
And how do you help your clients specifically? What is it that you offer your clients that another type of coach doesn't offer? What makes you kind of different?
Yeah. So I guess the difference is that it weaves in, some elements if the client needs it of health coaching. I'm a personal trainer at my roots, spiritual life coaching, core energetics, which is body of psychotherapy, and shamanic practice. I'm also a certified shamanic practitioner. So I weave in all sorts of different modalities depending on what that person needs, and some can be just through conversation and inquiry and asking questions, like a kind of like coaching and mentoring. But some of it is also meditation, shamanic journeying, visualization, really helping them to kind of drop in, open up, ultimately, and receive their own guidance. So I'm there to kind of facilitate a space, through my own guidance, my own knowing, ask the right questions, guide in whatever way I see fit. And I guess the style is, it's spiritual, but it's also very body focused. And that's what I'm very interested and curious about is, it's not all in the head. It's very much also how they're feeling it in the body. Where is it happening? How does it affect the energy? What is their body doing? And I'm slowly introducing more and more of the fitness personal training stuff. As I'm coming back to it myself, I'm weaving that in as a support for them, because it's so important. I'm discovering, I've kind of gone on this spiritual path for years, so I do the spiritual element very well. And now I'm coming back to my personal training roots and researching, training even more in what's actually called the genetic potential. How much of ourselves we can liberate through our training and our food and looking after ourselves. So I'm kind of combining those two. The body's always there as a not just tool, but as a vessel to really integrate the changes, to allow the changes to happen. But I'm also adding more and more now the health element for them as a support, because it really supports everything else when someone is making the changes, as you said, to their, not just their lives, but to their bodies, their health, their relationship with food, etc.
And do you work so purely one-to-one, or do you have a program? Do you have an online course? Because you mentioned about doing websites as a side thing. So how do you, the practicalities of working with clients, is one-to-one or courses, or how do you do it?
Yeah, mostly one-to-one for sure. And actually the website was separate. Now it's very much part of it as well. So when I do website design, I do film and photography and copywriting for some clients. And my favorite client is someone that wants to do both. So a creative, a therapist, an entrepreneur, a coach who wants to really come home and align with their gifts, their talents, what they do most naturally. And then we kind of weave that into their website, into their copy, into how they're showing up online with their online presence and their sharing, and really creating a platform for that. So I kind of slowly weaving those two things together for some clients. But as I said, it's mostly one-to-one. I do have groups. I have like a little membership called the Campfire, where we have 2 online circles every month, which is really a space for sharing and a bit of coaching and meditation. I haven't been running many live events or workshops in the past year, of course, but I tend to do some here in Crete. I ran retreats for a few years. When I first arrived, I was running retreats, collaborative retreats. And then for the past 3 years, I've been running soul quests, which are based on the vision quest, which is a traditional practice to go out into nature, to fast for 3 or 4 days, and to be without any distractions, just, yourself with the earth and nature, and to reconnect, to receive guidance and answers. So I've kind of, the soul quests utilizes elements of that. And if the person's ready, they go into a proper vision quest as well. But it's really an organized, bespoke, let's call it adventure in Crete, where I kind of let them have their own space a lot. I open up at the beginning, close at the end, and have different touch points throughout the experience. If they go on a vision quest, I'm a lot more hands-on and there by their side. So a lot of one-to-one work, to answer your question, in the past few years. There's some group elements as well. Yeah.
So you're saying you kind of almost going back to your roots to a certain extent and looking more at how the body functions mechanically, making sure that people have got to use your word, the right vessel so that they can carry on doing what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, on the vision quest, a big part of it is the fasting. So there's a whole preparation that comes from that. You can't go into it cold or you'll just be hungry and angry for 3 days. It won't work. It's just not, it defeats the point. There's a way to train your body, for example, to be able to go into that space in a way you actually, receive the gifts of the fast rather than it be a negative thing.
Yeah, I think that's what people see with fasting. It's a chore that has to be done rather than a gift, to use your words. What's the best place for people to reach out to you, Ed?
They can go to my website, of course. That's probably the best place. Everything's there, email, social media. It's the www.thedivinealignment.be. And they can also go through edwardpike.net, but that's pointed to the same site, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, don't worry about it. If you didn't get that, I will put that in the show notes later on. Listen, Ed, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any kind of final words or advice that you'd like to kind of leave people with?
Good question. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, about who we are as human beings, and a lot of it is very confusing. A lot of it is through conditioning and just years of outside influence. And there's real magic that happens when we can be ourselves, and really ourselves. We're designed to be this amazing individual, and yet at the same time to be conditioned and in connection with the outside world in our own unique way. And I really encourage people to start to open up that journey, because it's an amazing journey to come back to our authentic self, which includes the physical, it includes also the non-physical, and there's so much beauty and magic and gifts in accessing the more intangible, invisible aspects of us as well, and to bring them into reality, into the body, into our creative expression, into our work, into all these places. So I just want to say it's okay. It's a challenge. It's a challenging thing to do, but it's also the most rewarding journey anyone, I believe, can take.
I completely agree with you. It is a very rewarding journey. It's a challenge, but ultimately incredibly rewarding. Listen, Ed, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure also. Listen, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you along in the next episode. Bye now.
Bye.